We're going to begin part 2 of assignment 1 with getting to know our markers. And the first thing we have to do is to get a chart of our colors. But we're going to do it in a particular way. Not only do we want a chart of what the colors look like one against the other, we also need to know what gray would help to bring the value down, make them darker in the shadow. So what you're going to do is take your 10%, 20%, and 30%, 40%, and 70% cool grays and draw vertical lines, one right after the other, so that when you stretch a band of a color straight across and label it, you'll see what grays are not going to work and what are going to work. Now this is obviously overwhelming. This is as well, so is this. This is possible. I can still see pink. So if I use that gray, I know I'll need to put 2 coats of the pink. One, I'll put the gray underneath so that the pink is the most strongest influence. That's why you need to put the grays underneath, because it's the last marker color that you use that will have the greatest influence. This one is okay, but it barely makes it any darker. It seems like the same value. So that seems to be at the 20%. So if you put the numbers up here too, you'll be able to see bottom and top, the colors at the top and colors at the bottom. And then list your colors down here. Now this section, I'm going to give you a list to follow. So this section is our possible flesh tones, our light flesh tones, light Caucasian flesh tones. And in a little bit further, you'll see some darker possibilities for darker flesh tones. And I have those mentioned as well. And just go down the list. After you've got your gray stripes on, you put these stripes down and label them. What else is happening is that you're beginning to get a feel for the nib of the marker and the beauty of that flat end that it has. It has one part that's just flat, and it makes a beautiful stroke, and you're practicing your start and stop methods. It's a really fantastic nib. It's got a little pointy part to get into tiny little bits. It's got a chiseled part so you can put it on smooth and flat on the side. These are just the best marker tips. You also have the best marker paper. There only is a little bit of a quirk now with this paper that you have to be always aware of. You cannot use the front of the piece of paper. You cannot use it. It just repels the ink. So you have to turn it over and use the back. Usually what to do is to make a mark on the back, a little check mark, something, so you're always aware of what side of the paper you're using. Okay? Because it does make a huge difference, so you really have to be aware of that. The next thing you need to do is properly sharpen your pencil crayons. We're going to be using them on their side because the way they come in the package, there's not enough lead to do anything with it. So you've got to sharpen these. And when you do, you use this as an excellent sharpener. You take this off and you gently sharpen your pencil and gather the stuff in your hand and just throw it in here for the time being. But you have to do this gently because these pencil crayons are very, very soft inside. These are artist grade pencils, top quality. So they're very soft inside, and the wood is extra hard to protect that softness. So they're expecting you to really focus when you're doing this. You can't leave this on and crank away, otherwise you'll destroy them. You'll just destroy them. They'll just keep breaking on you. The other thing to do is keep them safely in the tin. Don't drop them. You'll shatter the lead if you drop them. They are replaceable. Curry sells them separately. Most art stores sell them singly and separately, and you may want to add to your collection. They have some gorgeous colors, and each of the colors corresponds to one of your markers. Well, we don't have exactly the same markers. I think 1 or 2 of them are the same. This is apple green, and we have, I think, an apple green marker and an apple green pencil crayon. So they do, the colors and the names do go together. These markers now, to find the name of them is tricky. It's tiny wee over here on the thin band of color. Identifying the grays is somewhat impossible. It's a little tiny wee here at the end. So what I'd like you to do, and it seems fussy, but it'll save you so much time, is to make yourself some paper trays. Now these are, I don't know if you can see that, but these are just pieces of your cartridge paper. I folded it over 3 times and made this accordion fold. That's all it is. Here's my big piece of cartridge paper. I'm going to fold it over into 3 parts. I don't know if I can show you. And see, it makes a thing like this. So I've got three folds like this. Oops. And you just even it out. These are rather short paper trays, but they're enough that it'll make it easy for you to get all of your things in. I had to make 2 trays. We have that many markers. Aren't we lucky that it's gonna, now if it's not perfect, it doesn't matter. But you fold that now. So I've got three thicknesses of paper. And then later you just fold it up and keep it, and you take it home and use it. And you just, now you need about 1/2 inch. You don't want to go too shallow or they're not going to sit properly in your tray. But you just make the first fold and fold really tightly. Then you come back this way, fold on the other side, and fold this way, and the process goes pretty fast. See? So now your markers sit within these little, this side is more attractive, but your markers sit inside here. And then you always know where they are. This is very important when you're working very quickly. I don't know how much time I've wasted over the years trying to find the marker that I was looking for. And it's very easy this way. And also, you just put a little mark there. Looking for the name of the color is fruitless. It takes forever. You'll never find it. I told you it's this tiny wee over here. Better to just put a color and say, oh, I want that color. Right? And also a lot of the barrels of our markers, the color on them is exactly the same. So how do you tell them apart? So that's your first jobs. Put your grays down, put your colors over top, take a whole sheet of your marker paper, don't forget to use the back. Then we have to find markers that will work and not blur when we put marker over top. Now, my favorite, of course, is the Pentel Sign Pen, and they do have these downstairs. They're not for everybody. They are thick, and if you're not used to bold lines, that might scare you. But they're water-based, so they work with alcohol markers. You have your ultrafine tip on your Sharpie, but that does blur. See how it's more sharp here? You may not see that, but it's very blurred here and very sharp here. So that same thing happens with the fine Sharpie. So these two, they bleed a little bit. We need to put our lines in first before we render with the marker. Otherwise, we over-render. And we're going to be using a minimal rendering technique because your client pays for all that time you spend, and you can't spend time making a photographically realistic thing. It's not what's needed, and it's not worth your time. So not going to happen. So also you have the Pilot Fine Liner. That one seemed fine, although it is too fine. It doesn't have much strength. We also have our Uniballs, our Uniball pens. They're quite beautiful. Our Micron and our Fine. I think the Micron is a little bit thicker, but still they're both very, very thin. My favorite are these Papermate flares. I get them at Staples. They usually have them. They're hard to get a hold of, but they're really the nicest. They don't bleed when you put marker over top, and they seem to be a pretty nice weight, a decent weight. So, and they always stay on top of the paper. You can feel this paper is very, very smooth. You don't put marker over pencil. You can erase it really, really well and then put marker over top. But you never put marker over pencil deliberately, or pencil crayon, because it will goo up your tip and you'll never get that out. That's why we always go about making all these templates, so that we can avoid doing that. Take a piece of cartridge paper out of your pad and fold it into quarters so that we have something we can make some templates on. And the first we're going to make is a cylinder, because it's kind of a nice combination of round and straight. So that'll work for us. This time, again, we can use our finger to, if you have small hands, remember, you won't be able to make it big enough with this. So if you have small hands, you know who you are, then you can use your longer finger. Okay, so we remember now with your ellipses that they're fuller at the front and shallower at the back. And one of the most valuable things to learn to sketch quickly. So much in the world is rounded like that. So same thing here. Now this is more shallow than the ellipse below. Generally speaking, overall it's more shallow because it's closer to the eye level. Even in that short space of distance, it would be. If you make it more open, it looks really, really quite crazy. So you want to make sure you don't want to have a crazy cylinder. Okay, now as you recall, we want to shade this, so we want to have a light where the light source hits the floor. So this is not the light source. The light source is way up high, but this is where it's hitting the surface that our cylinder is sitting on. So we can use that just as easily as using both. And the thing about this is, you see, as I skim it past the widest part of my cylinder, where it touches the cylinder tells me that that's the beginning of my shadow. That's where the light can no longer wrap around it. And when I do this on the other side to find out what this is going to look like behind, remember we're drawing through as if we could see through it. So this now is the shadow for that line. This line. It's the shadow for that line. And this is the shadow for that line. Okay? And this, we have to find this, and we can put it anywhere. We don't want this thing to get too big, so I'm going to put it here. And where it touches this, which is that, then now I can just make my ellipse. But it's better if you find the center of this and transfer it back. There. So there it is. And so now I know this is the center of that arc, and I'm going to wrap this around it. Make sure I go the highest point there, and then when I bring this around, I'll curl it round. So now we have the shadow for the side of it. It's this and it's this. It's the vertical. So we have the shadow for the side of it and the shadow for the uppermost part of it, or the furthest most part of it. That furthest most part of it there. Okay, so that's our shadow. That's our template. And now we'll go to our pad of paper. Remember though that you turn it over and you use the back of the paper. And make sure your cylinder is at least this big. if we're going to experiment with color and experiment with your markers, you need a fair chance, and if you make it too small, you won't have any chance at all. We're just going to tape our marker paper to our cartridge paper. We're not going to tape our template down on the surface below us because we want to be able to turn it to best advantage. There are sometimes, depending on your handedness. Also, in case you another look at this cylinder, and I can see that my verticals are not exactly straight. And try to train your hand to just give you a good line first out. I'm doing this a little sketchy, but it's better if you can do it. So turn your paper so you get a better line. And don't worry, we're going to do this a lot, so don't worry if it doesn't look the way you want it to look. And our goal now is to try shading this. And we're not going to put this in. We're going to try to do it with the colored marker. This you never outline in black because it's transparent. If you look around at the shadows around you, you can see right through them. Let's look at some of our colors. We'll start with the primaries. We've got two yellows. We've got the deco yellow and the goldenrod. Which gray marker would be best for us? I think for the deco yellow, it's a toss-up. I think it looks better with the 10 underneath it. 20 seems a little dark for it. So we're going to try it two ways. We're going to try darkening it with both of these and see what we get. First one we'll try. So let's trace it a second time so we have something here to look at. We'll put maybe use a 30% gray just to put our shadow in. Maybe don't fill it all the way in so we can put our other cylinder close by. Don't forget to put it back in the right place in your tray. And take that off now and move it over so you can get another chance to try the cylinder, shading it with different color, with different values. We'll try once with the gray and once with the goldenrod. There are some tricks you can use too, so. Okay, so try to get your best angle for this. A deliberate stroke is actually better. And it looks better. So go in there with a nice deliberate stroke. These are too feathery. They look very bad. So this is better, even though it's a little wonky. If all of your lines are a little off, they'll all look right. But if you now were to apply a ruler to this, they would all look wrong. So you just stick with your hand rendering. Now this is interesting because this will have a shadow now up the side of that. As I mentioned, if you're going to use gray, you do that first. Now, I'm going to turn this over and use one of these sides to soak up my ink. Don't have this on the desk, otherwise it's going to bleed through and make a mess on the desk. So you always put something to soak up your ink underneath. Now, if this happened to you, wherever it touched your cylinder, you have to show that I'm using the 20% gray. You have to show where it goes up the form because it went up this side. So I gave myself some guidelines and now I'm just filling it in. And the marker's so wet that it's filling it in quite easily. We're going to start with the primary, so we're looking at yellow now. Now I can give myself some more help here. I want to remember to draw that, conclude that in my shape. I draw that in with my yellow, my gray. I'm going to go with the 10% cool gray. That 20 looks a little dark for my yellow, and I did think it looked a little dark for it here, but now I know for sure it is, so because it's looking pretty dark. So the core dark, remember where the core dark, where our shadow began, where the light was interrupted, our core dark is about that far in, so I can give myself a little tick mark here to know where it's going to be. But the core dark will be inside there. So remember, have paper underneath you. So I'm going to put a core dark, and I'm using the flat, just the way you filled in your chart is the way you put that in. So I've got a few lines there. I've got a thick one in the middle and a couple thin ones on the side. And this is partial rendering, so we're not going to render this whole thing. We're going to leave a lot of the white of the paper over there. So there are a couple of ways you could go about it. You could go down from the top and up from the bottom. That seems to be working. This is far more yellow than it looked on my chart because I only put a single line. So maybe that 20 would have been okay. Now, as you go across, you start to give it up. You can start by just leaving some white gaps. Then you come back this way, and you can start the same way. We've got ourselves some help at the top. And you're trying to keep them straight as you can. And you give it up that way. You start to give it up. I think I prefer the darker gray. It gave it more oomph. So I can go back and put a little more yellow here and see if that will help to give it a little more. Now the top, for that, you want to make a big deal of this rim because light gathers at edges. So you just make a little swish across the top and you should be able to read what's going on there. If this gray is still too loud, it's still too gray and not yellow enough, and you flavor, I still think I like the darker shadow more, so I can go over and flavor over a bit here too. And then remember, there's light reflecting off the surface and going up in here, so I don't need to color that completely in. I can leave a little key line there. And in fact, if I have enough color on here, I can put a little key line here. So pencil crayons are really helpful. They help to clean stuff up if you got a little bit too ambitious down there. And this, it's not matching my shadow over there, so instead of adding more yellow, I'm going to put some white, and I think I'm getting closer now to matching those two things. They're getting a little closer. And once I put the white on, now I can't put marker over that now because it has pencil crayon on it, so it can't be made white again. But once I put the white on, I can go back now with my yellow pencil and clean it up some more, make it lighter, so, and put more color on it. It needs more color because I took the gray, lightened the gray, but I took away the color, so now I have to add a little more. So you see, you can tickle away. There's a little bit tickling you can do. So that's what happens when you use a gray underneath this yellow. So now we know that the 10 was better, the 20 was too much. Our other choice is to use our other yellow, which is goldenrod. So if you look at the two of them side by side, There's the goldenrod, which is a very dark yellow, and our deco yellow. And if we're going to use them together, we're going to have to find a way to get a happy medium, a color in between. We just need a little piece of plastic to do that. Don't use your set squares or anything like that. This is a cheap old sandwich bag, and it'll be perfect. In fact, if you open it up, it'd probably be better. Then when you're done, you could fold it back over. And this now gets very sticky, so you don't want to get it on you or on your clothing. So we can put some of the dark color right on the plastic bag. And then you pick it up with the lighter colors. So here are the two colors that we have, and we want something in between. So you just take your light color and swizzle it around in there, and we'll end up with the color in between. We don't have this color. This is the one we need. Now, to clean it off, you just rub it on our, see, we've got some spots already on our cartridge paper. You just rub it on here, and that'll clean it all off. And you don't have to worry. Your marker's back to normal. You'd proceed the same way. You would put down your lines to help guide you. I'm going to go a little deeper because this does not look right, does it? So that's going to look better if I go a little deeper, I think. Or maybe a little. So we've got some guidelines there. And have both of your markers open at the same time now, because you won't have time to add more to that puddle if you need it. So I'm going to start the same way. I'm starting on the shadow side. Remember, that's where the shadow began. So I'm starting over here. And notice I didn't start at the edge. I started inside the edge because the first stroke I make is going to be the darkest stroke. So remember the reflected light over here. So you put that in. Now I can start to give it up. I should have started giving it up sooner maybe, but oh well. And I'll put this on here. And I'm going to turn this way. It might have been better actually to put my dark stroke in while that other was wet, but I can re-wet it. To a certain degree you can re-wet it. Okay. So see what I mean about if your shape isn't large enough, you're going to have trouble coloring it, because this you need to use your whole arm. That's the best chance of getting it on straight. So now I'm going to wiggle it around in here, my plastic baggy thing, and now I'm going to put my color on. And you get those funny blobs at the top, but you just do your best to, and that makes a really, really pretty color. Now, what if I did it over here, over this? I think that would look so much better than the gray. So it wasn't really enough with our two yellows to use the gray. We had to go in and use a little bit more, and it looks great. This one is actually missing the gray, isn't it? It would look better. Clean your marker right away. And it may look stained when you're done, but that's okay. It'll still work cleanly. I'm going to go back now, and I'm going to turn this over. That's the beauty of marker paper. You can do stuff on the back and the front. Let's see now. So you can see that helped to lower the value of that. Make it not so bright. It was too bright to be a shadow. Not that we want everything to look deadly dull, but it was a little too bright for a shadow. And now we want to do something, make something of this corner, so we can put a little bit of that in just to show there's a corner there. no, the edge, not a corner, but the edge. Bring back our beautifully sharpened pencils and clean this up. Now, don't forget though, there are all those lovely whiteout pens, white pens and whiteout pens that would, this is bothering me. It's too dark back there. This one too, that just looks too dark, so you can knock it back with a pencil, with a colored pencil. You can do a lot with this pencil, it's very soft, so clean that edge up. And it always takes a little bit of time to warm up to the markers. So usually when you sit down to render something, you do a little bit practice work first before you start into something really important. Now I'm going to try, that's something I didn't try here with this because it wasn't yellow enough. So now, oh, that made a big difference. That helped a lot. The other thing about the pencil crayon is that it's grainy looking, even on such a smooth paper. If you don't like that, just take a tissue and fold it over, use your strongest finger, and blend that in. And that'll take away any of the texture if you don't want it. The surface that it's sitting on, it's got a shadow too. So we can go in maybe with our 20 and fill that in. And when I do these, I don't really give them, I don't want them to be important, so I just fill them in with vertical strokes, because in any situation there are way more verticals than there are any other shape, so they won't stand out very well if you put them in verticals. Whereas if you put them in circles or loop-de-loops, that's rare. So, and then there's always shadow underneath, so you put a little bit of that. And these are meant to be very, very dark. And it's okay to see your strokes. We see our strokes there. And you get some more practice at making vertical strokes there. Okay. And the paper and the markers will do their job. They'll kind of soften it out. So it means they're sitting on maybe a white surface. 20% cool gray is great for shadows on white surfaces. Go back to our template and try some more. Maybe turn our paper the other way so we won't be distracted by what's above. And we'll try a couple more. And each time you do it, try to make your cylinder a better drawing. Use your whole arm. I got stuck on tape. This now, I might give that up because I didn't like that big hard line back there. And we'll use our 20% cool gray to put in our shadow. And now we'll look at the next primary color, which would be red, and then we'll look at blue. Now, in our reds, let's get our chart. We have crimson red, and we have deco pink. So it's a really excellent spread of color because we have both a very, very light one and a very, very dark one. So as you saw, we can bridge the gap easily with that. It's a good time now to put things back. Every time you put them back, you get used to where they are on the palette. And that makes it most useful because when you're in a hurry and you're rendering at speed, you don't have time to flail around looking for these things. And as I mentioned, most of the colors at the tip of them, at the end of them, that are supposed to help you tell what they are identical. So it's not, they didn't do that deliberately. I don't imagine they did, but that's what happened. Okay, so get everything out of your way so you can do this using your whole hand. Try not to have a gunk of tape to be in your way either. There, so we can let that go. And if you have wobbles, don't worry, just keep going. Maybe we should try to start speeding up a little bit now. There. So what you'll be handing in is your chart with all of your colors, with your grays and your colors, and this as well. Label everything. And these, your primary yellow, and now we're doing our primary red, and your template. You can hand, just maybe trim your template out so that it fits on the page. You'll have to try and get it to fit on the page. All right, now we know how this is going to go. We've got our pink. We're going to give ourselves there, that's going to help. And we want to test out the comparison between our two values. And we want to try to find something in between. So we're going to put this on here. And we're going to pick it up with our pink. Just swizzle it around in there on our plastic baggie and put it down. Now there's a big spread between these two, so it's going to be a little tricky to get just the right pink. But what you'll notice is that the more times I use it, the lighter it's getting. So I may have to wipe a little bit of the red off before I go in there. We'll see. We're looking now to see the pink. Now we're in the same situation as we were before. So I'm going to try, since I like the way that went, I'm going to try the 20% on the back. Now I've got to keep track. This is my shadow side, so I'm going to try the 20% on the back and do the color on the front. Now, as I told you, these are teeny tiny, but you have to keep looking at the barrel. Once you got them free of the tray, it's better. I can't keep the tray in front of me, but if I could, I would, because once you put them back, then you know where they are when you want to reach for them. I'm not. I've got a pile here, so I've got the age-old problem of how to find the marker. Where did it go? So I'm going to put some of this over here. Okay, so that's it. And for good measure, I may put a little bit of tan over here too. I'm on the back of the paper. That way this will keep this in a lower register and a lower color, not as bright a color as on the other side. I'm going to just go halfway this time. And then I'm going to go in and pick up my red. And I have to make sure I've got enough red on here that I'll have enough. But this one I don't need very much, so. And if I have to, so you can give yourself a little starting place. Let's try that this time too. So we're trying out different things. And because that gray is dark, I'm going to go not just once over this, the way I did with the yellow, but I'm going to go a couple times. Now, when you do that, though, keep an eye on this, because that's going to go wonky on you. Now, we're giving it up, because we're getting close now to the middle. One more. Then I'm going to take this, and I'm going to put this over top. And it's really wet. And doing those extra strokes of the pink actually helped that red not to be too fierce. It's actually fitting in okay, but it's still not looking like a red cylinder. It's looking like a pink one. This is getting closer now to red, but it's bleeding out my edge. That's okay. I'll deal with that later. See, it got so wet that, woo, it got very wet. So now on this side, I'm going to have to put some of the red on this side too. This is in the light though, so I'm going to get this covered first. See how far over I'm going to go. And now I'll pick up some of the red and put that on. I don't want it to get as dark as the other side, but I do need it to get over there. Okay. So that seems pretty good. It doesn't look exactly red though, and this is pretty wild. Up here, I can do one more thing. I can put the red on the back. I should just let it dry. I know that, but it's too tempting. Okay, so that's a lot. So I'm going to take my pink and lower the value of this some more. So I'm trying to take the edge off, the contrast there. Now it's looking like a red cylinder more than it was before. I don't want to put red on the back of this, so I'm going to put some more red on here. Now these are all experiments. When you're doing something for real, you probably wouldn't be fussing so much, but we're trying to figure out our possibilities, so anything kind of goes. Our other option too is to get into our colored pencils. But sometimes when you use these darker colors, it's better to stick with marker too, since we have a nice dark color. And then you just clean your pink, and it will come back to exactly what it was before. Even if it doesn't look clean, it'll be clean. I don't like the color of that. Maybe it's not good to have this be all white. Maybe it would look better, since it's such a dark color, to color that in. I think that is better. And then we'll just put a little bit of pink across the top because that's in the light, although we should probably put a little bit of this in it. Go back with our white pencil and knock this back a little bit. That knocks it back a little bit. And this needs to have a more definite edge to it. And this, I might soften this at the back the way we did before. And this needs some. Sometimes it's a good idea too to use your pencil crayons to create a background. So this is our yellow, and purple is a nice contrast to it. See how using the pencil on the side is really very helpful, because I can cover more space more quickly. And it's a nice way to just taper off. You don't have to finish this statement. You can just taper off. And you can even bring a little bit of it inside like we did last time if you want to. And here are our color experiments. And here are the color experiments on this side. This helps to isolate them so that we can see them more clearly. Now this has gotten very busy, so it's probably a good idea to go in and restate my outline and get the best, give yourself the best chance to get your outline. Now if your outline, your pen isn't thick enough, just go over it 2 or 3 times. This wasn't straight, so I'm trying to correct it. I'm making it worse, of course. And this. Now the complement to this is green, so we could put a little of our green over here. We have to put our shadow in first with their 20%. Remember, we're using verticals because it's the most common direction and it will stand out the least. And a little bit, there's always a little shadow under here, so might as well fill this one in while we have the marker out. When we darkened our outline and put on a little background color, I think it's helping this one to look less overworked, because it is overworked. But that happens, your discovery, this is part of discovery, so we overworked that one for sure. Well, I did, I don't know about you. Okay. Okay, so that's one solution for the red. We tried a couple of things. We tried the gray, the 20% cool gray. The Harpo problem was that now I'm going to put a little pencil crayon over top that might help to soften the transition between that dark patch and my lighter side, my lighter patch. And I might put a little bit of that in my shadow. Shadows are dull, so you put the complement and the complement to that green that I put over is the red, so that'll tie in my 2 colors. I can use my white needs more attention in terms of sharpening. Keep them all razor sharp if you can. So they're all little nips and tucks and little things you can do that'll set things up. Oh, that's nice. Having a little more color around the outside of it was kind of nice. And the mistakes that you made by going outside the form actually add something. They add a little bit of harmony because everything isn't cut out and stuck down. There's a little bit of color, each of the colors in each thing. Okay, now we'll try the blue, our blues. We'll go to our chart. So we've got 2 blues, and our grays are cool too. So we know now, if we look at our 2 blues, that our spread of values is really too far between those 2. So we're definitely going to need our plastic bag again. Notice though that we can still see our strokes. That gives it a more unfinished, more lively look. You can put a flat wash down. We'll look at that too. It just takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of marker ink It uses up a lot of your ink, so you waste, I think it's a bit of a waste sometimes. Okay, here's our mixture now. Whoa, that's still very dark, but it's getting lighter. As I go up, it gets a little lighter, but it's quite a big stretch between those two, so we may have the same situation we had down here, trying to get them to bridge. So let's clean off our light blue. Although I suppose I could start with it darker, that might help. We do want to have a nice range of values, not just dark and middle, but a little bit of a light area too. I like to start on the shadow side because it's the tricky part on this one. Keep watching the patches of ink you have on this bag, because it's very sticky and it'll get all over the heel of your hand. Remember, you start inside because that's where you know. Oh, I can give myself, remember, a little guideline. Remember, start inside the foam because that's going to be the darkest that the marker is. And I'm usually using directional strokes, but this time, let's go more solidly, back and forth, back and forth. This is how to do it if you never want to see your strokes. You go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And we'll even let this be the lightest value in the light this time. And now we'll go and I'll reach for some of this, my dark blue, and I'll start putting that in. And if you really, really want to get it blended, oops, this is how you do it. You just keep feeding it while it's wet, and we won't see any of the strokes. You might as well try it. Now, I know I better not move this because I can see the ink puddling underneath. So now I know that I better just keep going across, and as I do, this is naturally going to get lighter. The dark ink is going to be gone out of the marker nib. So I can just keep going and it will get lighter. So this is the opposite of what we have been doing. It's a more completed look. It's more filled in. So just know you have that option too. So we're more doing a combination of the two. In the last ones, we've been combining the two. I should put some of this over on the other side. Remember, we haven't used our gray yet either. We could use our gray. That's always an option. And the grays are cold, like the blue. So, oops. So, that would be an option for us. Now, we just better let that dry. Don't move it because the color's puddled underneath, so just leave it. Clean your marker and put your cap back on. It's good to put it on the end because if you mix these up, the color inside will get on your marker nib and destroy it. So it'll never be the same. Keep track of them by putting them on the end. Outline those. That's how you do it if you want to blend. At the top, we want to put this, we want a rim, but this now we can put the light one right up here. But the problem with it is that it's a different temperature. The one below, the darker blue, is more toward purple. This one is more toward green. So if I don't put some of that darker one up here, it's not going to match. You recall I was mentioning about having some white pens. This is my Sharpie water-based pen. I can use that to clean things up quite easily. I didn't probably shake it enough, but that's my shadow under there. But if it's really bothering me to have some of this stuff, I can clean it up. And this would be nice to have a nice line right here. Also, there are reflections that go straight down. So if you want to throw a couple of reflections on the top of this just to add that, and if we still want some light here, we can put first some white. And then a little bit of blue over top. We could do that. Put your pencils back in order. You can put reflected light in. Now, well, most definitely, since I use that whiteout pen, now, since I use that white pen, I'm going to need to use a pencil crayon if I want to do any background color. I'll need to use a pencil crayon for sure. Now, orange is the complement here to the blue. We discovered with the last one it looks better if the color's more intense. Now, this blue is a little more purple, so the orange may not do everything that I was hoping for here, but actually gave it a little bit of texture. That's another thing as well. Your pencil crayons are great for sharpening up edges. If it was important that this be a nice clean edge. And this, I think, is maybe too much an edge, so. We have our primaries now. We know how to get a value scale with our yellow and our red and our blue. And different techniques. We use the partial rendering plus a little bit of a blended technique as well. They are a bit blended, but we left the strokes. We left the white of the paper. And with these darker ones, we didn't, but we could have. We could have done it. But just to try more of a blended technique and more of a combination of blended and not so blended.